So Mike, in this long career, I'm guessing maybe you have hired hundreds of people in Microsoft, and some of your hires are really good. I can vouch for that.
I would argue at least 90%.
Yes.
But not 100%, but certainly 90% I think is fair.
So what you look for when you are interviewing technical and personal leadership quality, what are things you look for?
Well, hiring's a passion for me. I wrote like a 30-page document on hiring and all the nuances and stuff at my current company that we sort of look for, because there's quite a bit to it. There's more to it than meets the eye. But I start with Bill Gates, something I learned from him in the early days. It used to be called the Bill Gates 2, which became the Bill Gates 3. What he was looking for, and this is in the early days, so let's go back in the 90s. He was looking for engineers that had high horsepower and high energy. So there's somebody that's able to learn, able to handle an interactive conversation, is willing to learn, willing to study, and is able to communicate. High energy, they're willing to work. So you can be brilliant and not willing to work, and what good are you? And then what he said is, this was great from Bill, what he said is, I was hiring too many doctorates, they were geniuses and stuff, but didn't ship anything. Because shipping software, as we all know, is hard. You have to make compromises, and if you're a perfectionist, it's very hard to ship. So he realized, I need a third one. High horsepower, high energy, gets things done. So somebody that's actually able to make the hard trade-offs required to ship. So he added a third dimension, and then I added a fourth dimension that I figured something else to me that's the most important of all the dimensions of all. And what I refer to it as professional integrity, which means that the person's committed to being great at what they do. They're not going to be just okay. They want to be great. They want to be the best version of themselves. When you have that, you're golden. And I would say that a lot of times people want that high horsepower. I would much prefer, which I would classify myself as medium horsepower, high energy, gets things done, and extreme professional integrity. Extreme professional integrity. Meaning absolute, now remember I talked about ownership, which means if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to learn, you're going to humble yourself, you're going to get other people, you are not going to be satisfied failing over and over again. You're going to get other people to help. And if you get those things in a hire, you're on your way. And then I'll add the extra dimension, which you don't see people listing on a lot of these videos. The more important even more important than hiring is developing. Is what are you going to do to develop the next generation of engineers? And my favorite example of that would be, I observed something very interesting early in my career, and it occurred across multiple companies, so I know that this is repeatable. You hire any computer science engineer, good engineer out of college, worked hard, learned engineering, knows how to write software, you hire them into a company. You pair that person with a great coach and mentor, they're on their way. They're going to double the average promotion velocity. You take the same engineer, put them with a poor coach or manager, they're going to be managed out in 2 years. That's the same person. So was it a hiring mistake? No, it was a developmental mistake. It's all about developing. So you can literally take anybody you have and get a lot out of them. And a recent example was at a company I recently joined. I hired where one of the engineers was pointed out to me in my introduction, I was going to manage as the worst engineer in the group. In an organization about 100 people, that's the worst engineer, has no chance of, no potential. And so to me, my eyes just sparkled. I went, oh, now we're talking. And my point being is that I'm a coach. And so when you see somebody maybe struggling a little bit, it's all about the coaching. And it turns out what oftentimes happens is people are in the wrong role. They're in the wrong role, or they don't understand what's really expected of them, and they need those expectations set, and they also need teaching. In other words, he hadn't had some of the background issues that were needed for him to be successful. And so what I did is parked his desk next to mine, went through the patterns and practices training and stuff that I do with all the engineers that I work with and stuff, and started developing him. And I told the manager, I expect him to go from the worst to best in 1 year's time, and that's exactly what he did. Ripped through SD2, SD3, was on the verge of SD4, and then basically broke the bank in terms of money at his next job. And all that he needed was to change roles a little bit. He was doing a role that he wasn't well suited for, and to be unleashed. Somebody that got out of the way. Got out of the way and let him flourish. And that dude is on his way. And that's been repeated over and over and over again.
I think that's a very important tip. I will take it very personally, because I think I was missing that understanding that more than hiring a good person, it's more about developing somebody who is even on an average person, but you can turn them into a geniuses.
And don't limit them. Remember I said don't limit them by your own limitations. You give somebody that has a just some computer science background. So usually, we like people with a degree, but the alternative to that is I've had people be successful that were hobbyists. In other words, they do computing because they love it. This is their hobby. This is what they do. Some of those are the best developers you'll ever find. They never went to college for writing software. But they could have written the books that are in college because all they did was study, because you have the vast internet now where you can study anybody and everybody that's out there.
True.
They just attach themselves to great engineers everywhere and are 12, 14, 18 hours a day. Look at the hours. You know, they usually figure it takes 10, 20,000 hours to master a domain. All of a sudden they got that in there in 3 or 4 years.
Right.
In college, you only get a couple thousand hours a year, and usually you're diversified, right? Even computer science, you're not spending very much time in computer science, really.
Right.
Compared to if somebody was doing that on their own full time, no comparison. They're a specialist at that's what they love, they can be wildly successful. True. So again, don't limit them. See what they're able to do, see examples of what they're able to do, and then get the heck out of the way. And then just provide developmental coaching, and then, like I said, teaching. Right. And we'll get into patterns and practices maybe a little bit later, but that's one of the teaching mechanisms you can do. Because what you want people to do is to love engineering. And so I would say the most important thing with hiring is integrity and honesty.
True.
If you hire somebody that has integrity and honesty, they will look at themselves and determine, I can't actually function at this job. Maybe you give them a shot, right. And they're like, you know what, it's really not for me.
Right.
What's wrong with that? You have the honest discussion, help them find a job that's a better fit for them.
True. True.
Remember I said that context matters. You can take the same developer, you take an innovation developer and put them in a mature company, they're probably going to struggle.
Right.
On the other hand, you take a hardcore financial engineering engineer,
right.
data-centric engineer, and put them in a startup, and the same person under different circumstances is seen as failing.
Yes.
And this also ties back to situational leadership, right? If you think about situational leadership, it's all about figuring out where a person is relative to a particular type of task.
Exactly.
Okay? Notice if you study situational leadership, you realize that it's not about the individual, it's about the task. Maybe you're an expert in one type of coding, but you're a novice in data or financial engineering,
yep.
which is a very different pivot on that. Well, you need different types of developmental coaching if you're junior in that domain.
True.
So in other words, you're an expert in the space that you're in, or a UI expert, but you're going into back end, you're going into something very different. You simply need to be developed in that dimension. Now, there's a few people out there that refuse to fail. Those
right.
are the very, very rare ones, and everybody's looking for those, and not very many of them around. And those are folks that'll just do whatever it takes and are able, have high horsepower, and they're just able to do it. True. Those people exist, they're rare. True. Most of us are everybody else.
True.
So what you have to do is say, how can I take really any engineer that I bring in and make them wildly successful, the best version of themselves, and you'll be shocked at how much you can get out of every engineer you can ever hire.
True, true. So Mike,